Welcome to Food and Facilities, an online show for West Coast Industrial Solutions magazine. Our goal is to cultivate knowledge to feed the world by focusing our quarterly trade issues on safety, compliance, and innovation within manufacturing, agriculture, food processing, and food and beverage industries. This episode will be discussing digital lot tracing, trade training during COVID, and the pandemic's effect on carbon emissions. Welcome to Food and Facilities. I'm your host, Tara Sweeney with West Coast Industrial Solutions magazine. Make sure to subscribe or check out our website to see what advertising options we have. Go to wcismag.com/subscribe or /advertise and see our archived magazines and our current issue in a digital PDF format. Today we'll be discussing digital traceability with Tyler Marshall of Parity Corp. We'll be talking about trade training during COVID with Tyler Richardson of Opportunity Stanislaus and Volt Institute, and then we will also be discussing the pandemic's effect on emissions with Linda Angulo López. So we asked and you voted. We decided that we wanted to rebrand the magazine, and you chose Planting to Processing as our new name. Now we just need you to help us choose our new logo. Here are the 5 different options that we have. Go to our social media channels. It's West Coast Industrial Solutions magazine on LinkedIn and Facebook, and then it's at WCISMAG on Instagram and Twitter. And now to bring on my first guest, Tyler Marshall, president of Parity Factory, and he will be discussing how digital traceability can reduce risks and find efficiency. Tyler?
Thank you, Tara. We're really excited to be here. I really appreciate you guys taking the time and giving us this opportunity to talk a little bit about what we do. So just as a little bit of background on kind of who I am and who we are, Parity Factory is a software provider, and we have a system built specifically for food manufacturers, food processors, and those dealing in the agricultural industry. We've actually been in business just over 30 years, got our start in the Alaskan seafood industry, of all things, with our original founders actually working in that industry and deciding to start a software company that focused on helping those companies track their inventory, understand their accounting side, some other functionality on that front as well. I've personally been here just over 10 years, and during that time, we've really narrowed our focus as an organization. And with that, our focus is really all about the labeling requirements, the food safety requirements, quality data capture, and managing the inventory from the second that the product arrives at any FDA-regulated facility to when it ultimately gets to that end consumer. Now, of course, there's specific regulations around that. All the companies we deal with are handling this in some format, typically pen and paper, Excel, things like that, to effectively, meet those requirements coming in from those regulatory bodies. What we've really focused on, where we've really come to play, and where the article that we put together on this highlights, is that through automation and through basically creating digital records, either directly from equipment in line, whether it's from the labels and scanning those barcodes or managing the process at each step, we can greatly increase efficiency, of course, of tracking that information and provide much more detailed visibility to something that can be somewhat manual and labor-intensive process.
I know a lot of industries are realizing that there is an increased need for digitization because there's an increased demand, especially now during the pandemic, and your product is a good resolution for that.
Absolutely. I mean, whether it's increased demand of the products that they were already making, or we've seen, of course, a lot of our companies pivot and switch into different means of getting that product delivered to the end consumer. So larger e-commerce presence, home delivery with people not wanting to go out to grocery stores as much, and the increase in orders and understanding, of course, where all of that product is going. When you have a truck backing up and headed out to deliver 1,000 orders in a week, you really need to know and have that ability to track it in a digital way, because 1,000 sheets of paper becomes tough to manage pretty quick.
Definitely. And because it's digitized, it increases the efficiency, and it will also reduce any errors in lot tracing.
Absolutely. Of course, anytime you have a paper-based system or even an Excel-based system or something along those lines where it requires a lot of interaction with the end user, you're going to end up with errors. I wish my handwriting was personally better, but you definitely wouldn't want me being the one filling out that paperwork out on the floor there, because at the end of the day, you would be asking me if it was, a number or a letter half the time. And so what we can do with, of course, printing the labels and using barcode scanners, or using even vision systems in line and actually reading the packaging and or vision systems on the product, we can understand, of course, those quality attributes and make sure that the data is accurate as it flows out into the other systems and processes that are required by that company.
I know meat, dairy all had increases in demand during this period. Do you see anything that is specialized to those industries that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so with our original start being from the Alaskan seafood industry, anything that is related to proteins, so when you talk about having a whole animal that you're starting with, whether that's a fish, a cow, pig, whatever it happens to be, there's a lot of similarities and needs for those organizations in tracking, of course, where that original animal came from, the original processing, and then ultimately out to whatever ends up in the consumer's home. And with that, our system and kind of what we've designed out are a number of features, and the platform really supports those processes where other software solutions out there with lot tracing, maybe within other industries, it's just slightly different, if you will. And so we wanted to make sure that we covered those scenarios. So not only can you see the lot tracing side of it, but ultimately, understanding how much product you're actually getting from that process and being efficient, reducing waste, along with the food safety side.
And this will help your clients be USDA and FDA compliant, because they'll be able to more easily trace their lots, especially in the case of mitigating any repercussions from a recall.
Absolutely. I mean, many of our customers, of course, are already, meeting those compliant or they're compliant with those guidelines prior to us coming in to be in business. But we also see, again, with the especially during this time and the expansion, people building new facilities, people building on, new production lines and processes into it. We're getting in a lot of the times now on the ground floor with those and helping design even the process so that it's efficient. We can actually get that data. They have real-time inventory throughout each step, and they don't have to, be concerned with their sweat actually reaching that compliance. They basically have it directly out of the gates. And so, yes, we definitely help make that easier. I've had quite a few customers just note, of course, that we help them sleep at night when it comes time to be worried about any sort of recall or things like that.
And if our viewers wanted to get in contact with you, how would they reach you to be able to use your services?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best way to reach us, of course, is we have links and people on our website that are ready to answer, easy questions and or set up a more in-depth review of the process. Prior, of course, to these times, and especially with the manual nature of our job and just kind of working with the equipment and things like that, we would often travel to all the facilities. Well, we've had our shift in that area, and of course now we're geared up and have means and ways to actually demonstrate things even more remotely, as well as get things up and running remotely, just to, of course, minimize the risk and exposure in different people that are, walking in and out of these food processing facilities.
Definitely. And so can I get your contact information and your website for our readers?
Yeah, so the website is going to be ParityFactory.com. Sorry, I should have been more specific to answer your question there. The website is the best, and the ParityFactory.com, as well as my email address, personally, or work email address there is tmarshall, so TMARSHALL, and then that's going to be at ParityCorp, ParityCorp.com. And of course, be happy to share that in addition to some other individuals who helped write the article. Got to give them credit here as well. So Alex Lewis, and get his contact information out as well.
Great. Well, thank you for joining me today, Tyler, and I look forward to sharing more of your expertise in this field.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys taking the time for us and letting us participate in this.
Thank you. Make sure to reach out to Safe Food Alliance if they have a full 360-degree suite of food safety services. When it comes to food safety, they've got you covered. You can visit them at their location in Kingsburg, California, or you can visit them online at safefoodalliance.com. Another one of our sponsors is Custom Digital Portfolios. Make sure to reach out and get your digital menus ready so that your customers can know what you have available and be able to reach out to you, especially with the pivoting for the pandemic, where they can help with the distribution and pickup of your food. So go to bit.ly/DM Fresno and get your digital menus today. I'm here with my second guest, Tyler Richardson of Opportunity Stanislaus and Volt Institute. Tyler?
Hi, welcome. Good morning. Thank you for having me, Tara.
Thank you for joining us. Can you give our readers and our listeners a little background on yourself and Opportunity Stanislaus and Volt?
Sure, absolutely. We'd be happy to. So Opportunity Stanislaus, we are the economic development organization for Stanislaus County, located in the heart of the Central Valley. We work with companies throughout the Central Valley and throughout Stanislaus County to kind of understand what their needs are and to try and help them grow and thrive here in the Central Valley. And a few years ago, we went out to kind of see how our companies were doing and find out what their needs were. And by and large, they all had the same need, which was workforce. And the economy at the time was starting to get better, and there was a skills gap issue that a lot of the companies were wanting us to address. And so we came up with a concept to do a manufacturing training center, which is now called Volt Institute. And so it's kind of an innovative model. We've got industry at the middle, and we have put together a very specific, very detailed training plan for very specific needs they have in manufacturing here in the northern San Joaquin Valley, and you're seeing some of that behind me today.
What are some of the courses that you offer?
Yeah, so we have a really robust 360-hour maintenance mechanic program, and so in that maintenance plan, there's all sorts of different duty areas, as we call them. There's mechanical drive systems, there's multiple types of pump systems, there's PLC for some of the higher end stuff. There's electrical, there's bearings and all sorts of different mechanical elements as well. We have 10 duty areas as we assign them. Some are kind of the more entry mechanical, some are more again on the PLC and heavy electrical end of things. There's 360 hours of total defined training. So our maintenance mechanic program is kind of our pillar program. It was the first program we launched in 2017 when we started Volt Institute. And in addition to that, though, we've got other trainings that we are doing as well. We do 2 leadership programs for folks that are working in manufacturing already, both for frontline supervisors as well as senior executives of companies. And then we do kind of a 20-hour lean boot camp series around lean manufacturing principles and Six Sigma and those sorts of things. So folks that are in manufacturing can kind of understand some of those conceptual critical thinking skills as well around lean process.
And how have you had to pivot your operations, especially now with social distancing and the pandemic happening?
Yeah, so, like all of us, we've had to adapt and adjust as we've got new information from our county health officer. I will say Volt is actually ran as a partnership between Opportunity Stanislaus and the County Office of Education. So the 2 organizations have teamed up to actually run Volt day to day. That partnership allows us to have really good access and information to our county leadership, including the health department. And so our county health official has been in contact with Volt and our team to let us know what some of the standards that we need to adhere to. It's kind of hard to see today, but we have made a lot of strides in kind of COVID, response to this. We have robust sanitation practices in place where students are cleaning off and sanitizing their use after every time they use a piece of equipment. We have PPE equipment, so masks are required. We do temperature checks and screenings at the front end. And then, we have also made format adjustments. So instead of having large group training, we now do everything one-on-one or individualized, so that way we can maintain social distancing. The instructors maintain distance from the students, and we don't have large groups anymore like we used to. So we're adapting, like all of us, and making the best of it.
What are some things that you would need from possibly our readers and listeners that they could help you with?
Yeah, so one thing to know, about a third of our students are actually incumbent workers, meaning they're actually working with industry. They're in facilities and food processing organizations. Maybe they're lower skilled, so maybe they're seasonal employees or they're operators, and they get kind of tapped on the shoulder and they get sent through Volt to upskill and join the maintenance team. So one thing that we always encourage, executives and company leaders to look at is, looking at creating internal talent pipelines and using Volt as a way to increase and upskill your current workforce. Folks that have a vested interest, have a really good record, have the right work ethic, but maybe lack some of the skill. Use Volt as a way to upskill them and put them in on the maintenance side or put them in other areas of your organization that maybe you have some deficiencies. So that would be kind of the main thing off the bat, is looking at your internal workforce and seeing if Volt can be a solution for that.
And if they wanted to get in contact with you, how would they reach you?
Yeah, so our website is probably the best way, voltinstitute.com. There's a number right on the website that gets you a direct access to Kevin Fox, our Director of Marketing and Student Engagement. So you could call Kevin and say, hey, heard you guys on the show on Saturday. We wanted to learn more, and we can do tours. We're open for tours here at Volt. We can do a virtual tour. We've done virtual stuff as well. But voltinstitute.com is probably the best and easiest way to get access to all the programs and then to call directly from there.
Is there anything you'd like to add before we close for today?
Absolutely. So we are currently in growth mode. As much as we're having to adjust our current programming, we have growth on the horizon. We're projected to grow about 2 to 3 times our capacity over the next 12 to 18 months. We have new equipment coming in every month. We are not only scaling out, but we're scaling up from a technical standpoint. So we've got heavy PLC equipment coming in. We've got training equipment called mechatronics, which kind of marries mechanical and electrical together. There's got robotic arms on it. And so there's a lot of technical increases in advanced manufacturing that's happening. And we want to be on the forefront of that. So if your workforce, if your equipment is getting into, PLCs and mechatronics and, heavy advanced manufacturing, come check us out, because we've got equipment coming online that will help, meet the needs from your workforce standpoint. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Tyler. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to being able to provide more information on how to get in contact with you in Volt and Opportunity Stanislaus.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity and the time today. Best of luck. Stay safe. Again, voltinstitute.com has all that information, and we look forward to talking to you guys next time.
Thank you for joining.
All right. Thank you for having us. Take care.
One of our sponsors today is ProCheck Coatings. They do polyurethane coatings for your food or facility. It is antimicrobial and it's skid resistant. This is an example of before the coating and after the coating. Make sure to give them a call today at 559-323-8147. Another one of our sponsors is Fine Print Plus. Make sure to mention them that you saw them on Food and Facilities, and you can receive 100 free direct mailer postcards or 15% off orders of 250 plus. You can reach them at 559-237-4747, graphics at fineprintplus.com, or request a quote at fineprintplus.com/quote. They also have translation services, so make sure to reach out to them if you would like to make your message bilingual. And this is my final guest, Linda Angulo López, and she's a botanist and sustainability hacker, and she will be discussing emissions in California during the pandemic. Linda?
Hi there, Tara. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining today. Can you give our watchers and listeners a little background about yourself and why you decided to research emissions?
Well, I'm a botanist, as you said, and I came to France 20 years ago, and I've been a mom for the last, well, I'm still a mom, I haven't. But I decided to start studying again, so I took a course with UC Davis, and it's a GIST course on a spatial analysis, and it was, I just chose this as a project because I really wanted to learn more about satellite image analysis, in fact.
Can you give us a little more information about ArcGIS, the system that you use to do the analysis?
So it's not an open software. It's you have to have a license with ESRI, and when you take the course, they actually give you a license for a year. So the work that I did, I cannot use it for to gain income. It's I will upload the data, and if anybody needs the data, it's I will share it with them. So they just need to contact me. It's just, yeah. It's a type of software to analyze to create maps and to analyze geospatial information.
Okay. And would you like to begin your presentation on the research that you've done?
Yes, yes. So let's share screen. So in fact, the presentation, I started off with No2 emissions. And I know there's some confusion about No2 CO2. There's a lot of O2s happening. So in fact, my motivation, just to show you, so the output, the final output was an app, a geo app, where you can actually look at the map with the emissions. You can take a survey, you can contact me, you can look at the map with the impacts on the ecological areas as well. So just to explain to you my motivation for the study, in terms of, there are many impacts there. So I'm not sure if you know Kate Rawford and the idea of the donut economy. So it's a bit like, you know, the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so what she does is to take, you could consider this like the Sustainable Development Goals, and these are the ecological factors, in fact. So she integrates both of them. And so to have a sustainable development, what you need to consider is both the ecological factors and also the human factors. Okay, so her concept is to be thriving as a society. We need to be within this green donut, she calls it. Okay, it's a space where you balance the ecological needs of the earth and the human needs. Okay, so what we have here, in fact, is in today's state of the world, we have the issue of climate change. Okay, so this is why there is this big motivation for CO2 emissions. In fact, CO2 is one of the most important emitters, because it's so we are burning it so quickly. So and then my motivation personally was really to do about nitrogen loading. So it's not exactly the same motivation, but there are overlaps, in fact. So you have overlaps like nitrogen loading. It affects climate change very slightly, but it has a very big impact of biodiversity loss. Okay, and my motivation, the second part of my project will be to calculate, because nitrogen dioxide pollution, it affects vegetation, and also vegetation affects or improves the air quality. In fact, my motivation, the next step is to go towards this. The first step was just to quantify, in fact. Okay. And this is, I don't know if you did this at high school. You remember this?
Yes.
So the problem is we have what we call the disruption of the nitrogen cycle in today's society. You have a double, there's actually twice the amount of nitrogen being produced than what was available in the natural system. The impacts of this overproduction of nitrogen is that we have ozone, which is dangerous for human health. And then you also have pollution of the waterways and things like that. And so just to explain the satellite image I chose to take, there are different analysis you could do. But because nitrogen sits here at the troposphere near the ground, I use images that capture the nitrogen at that level. So this is an image of what the satellite does, in fact. So you have a satellite. Oh, no, that's not the satellite. That's the sun. So the sun, it shines on the earth, and the light bounces off, okay, of the earth, and it also bounces off clouds, etc. And the satellite, it captures all the light. In fact, it's UV, the radiation, and so my analysis, it's not like a very high level analysis. The people at NASA, what they do is they take the radiation and they do a calculation, and then they give us an image. So you can search and you get an image over the area you want with a type of like a square, mm-hmm. which has a special, which has a color that is linked to a quantity. So you can do it for a lot of particles. I chose the nitrogen dioxide particles. So you get, and then the problem with this analysis is when you have a lot of cloud cover. So if you have cloud cover over 30% of an area, you do not get an image, okay? So, and good news, Tara. You guys are doing great in California. So this is, you have achieved sustainable growth from 2000 to, in fact, it was around here, 2006, when you guys really started achieving sustainable growth. So it's the COVID, it did reduce the No2 emissions. But because the EPA already had the cap and trade, and they had regulations to control power stations, there's massive drops of, this is greenhouse gas emissions, but it also includes nitrogen dioxide emissions. So you had massive drops. And California is, in fact, an example for the rest of the world, and how the cap and trade is functioning, how we call them in environmental regulations, we have what we call the carrot and the stick. So the carrot is when you reward people for doing something that improves air quality or water quality, and the stick is, of course, when you have a fine for polluting. So you have the GDP increasing, population increasing, but at the same time you had greenhouse gas going down, okay? So this is like a great sign that you can achieve, and this happened around here in 2006 when the EPA put in place these measures, in fact. So COVID, yes, it helped a lot, but the big change was here when the EPA put in place these regulations. So the global warming emission sources, so this is for what you call global warming emissions, okay, not nitrogen dioxide emissions. And this is the state of affairs as it is now. Of course, transport is just something that just never goes away. And industry, so you have electricity. Agriculture, you were concerned about, is 8%. There's a lot of slack given to agriculture, but in fact, there's a lot of pressure as well put on farmers. I myself, I come from South Africa, and my ancestors, my brother is a farmer, and I know the pressure that is put on farmers to produce. And in fact, you need to integrate what people are eating. I mean, a lot of our agricultural production goes for animals, in fact. So we need to really decrease our meat consumption. And so just to talk about, when you, just to link the two together, the NO2 and the CO2. So for 1 gram of nitrogen, it's the equivalent of 298 grams of CO2, okay? So so it means it has a bigger impact, but luckily, well, I don't know if it's luckily or not, there is more CO2 that is produced. The worst is actually the sulfur hexafluoride, this molecule here. But there's very little of it produced. So in terms of when you look at greenhouse gas emissions, what people are quantifying is the CO2 and the methane, and very little of the NO2. I'll show you in the next slide. So NO2 is like about 3% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in California, or was in 2004. That is not significant, okay, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. But remember, it has significant impacts on biodiversity, and this is the problem, in fact. So you cannot only judge or evaluate a pollutant by one impact. Climate change is important, but there are also other things that are happening about biodiversity, etc. And in fact, climate change, the whole motivation is about the loss of biodiversity. So if you look at the impacts of NO2, okay, again, transport, it's really complicated, in fact, because you have agricultural soils, and both, whether you're using organic or inorganic fertilizers, both of them are going to pollute, okay? So, and then you also have the crop itself. So you have the leguminaceae, like the beans, which capture nitrogen and give off nitrogen. So you cannot just by quantifying something saying it's good or bad, okay? Because it's better, in fact, to eat the legumes as a protein than to eat meat. I'm not vegetarian or anything like that, but just in terms of ecology, okay? So it's complicated. It's not just a matter of numbers. So coming to my I did this specialization on Coursera with Nick Santos. He's from California, UC Davis. And so this is one of the data I collected, which is the EPA ground level emissions. And as you can see, this is California here. There are not many points, and I don't know why, but they have a lot of collection points here. I think this is where the Pacific oil and gas fields are, and there's also the smog belt here.
And larger cities.
Yeah, that's San Francisco. I think that's where you are, Fresco. So with the EPA, with ground level monitoring, you can only, because of the cost of it, you only have a limit of data collection points. And with the satellite image analysis, you can have 800 data collection points, okay? So when I collected the data, so This is the sort of image you get. And these little dots, when I extracted from the image the number, okay, for the amount of NO2. And here you see this violet is very high levels. And of course, it's here. This was during the COVID period. So I extracted a lot of images. There were 21 images. It's quite complex. But basically, this is the Los Angeles basin. This is the agricultural area. This is around Fresco. It's complicated because there's the interstate highway here, for example, and there are some regions that don't, like here is a natural area, but you have pollution here probably because of Las Vegas. So I didn't collect data from the whole world. I just collected from California. So I'll explain the data better later on. And then I also created some points, okay, just to be able to put a name to the place to make more sense. So, for example, some of the points I added on did not exist with the EPA monitoring stations. So I chose some points in the forested areas and the reserves that don't exist with the EPA. And so I merged both of the data, and you can go to this map. There's a link, and you can interact. This is just a presentation, so it's not interactive. And so if you click on a point, for example, you can see all the emissions. I collected from January 1st, 2019 till June 2020, and then I also did some aggregations, so you can have a look at the data if you want. So this is the actual analysis project to show you the different maps I created with the images. I won't go into the technical details, but so that was the data extraction. And this might be more interesting for you, in fact, because what you see here is the analysis, okay? So from the data analysis, you can see there are just these three places, in fact, which are dominating what happens in the state of California. So it's Los Angeles, Riverside, San Francisco, Sacramento, San Jose. Sacramento and San Jose are really down here. So you have a cyclic effect where emissions really spike in February in these three regions, and it changes the profile of the whole state. In fact, this is why it makes no sense to take an aggregation of NO2 emissions of the state of California, because in fact, what you're going to have is just a view of what is happening in Los Angeles, in the big cities, in fact. If you look at the little towns like Fresco, for example, it's somewhere here. It's very stable. It doesn't really change a lot. But here you have cyclic effects from March to October. You have a peak, and then this is April, then March to, yeah, it's a repetition, in fact. So you have the cyclic effect. And this is the emissions comparing 2020 to 2019. So what you have, this is 2019, and this is 2020 here. So you can see there's a big difference. So that's, for example, 2020, and that's 2019. So you have a massive drop in emissions in Los Angeles, Riverside, in everywhere, even in the forested areas. Mm-hmm. So what happens here in the big cities, it impacts on all the other players, in fact. And what I did is an overlay of the ecological regions in California. So you have the big problem, in fact, is the Mediterranean California, which is this region here in red here, is literally cut in half by the pollution in Los Angeles. So this is the good times during COVID when everything went down. So in the good times, it's cut in half. So you have a problem with. I've never been to Los Angeles or America for that matter, so I don't know what is happening here. But I don't know how you can really change people's behavior. You had lower emissions, as you saw in the previous graph. The emissions went down, okay, from here to there, but it's still an important impact. It's still, at this level, you're still having, NO2 is what we call a short-lived species, so it transforms into ozone. So when you see purple, it means that it's becoming ozone, and which is dangerous for human health. So people who live here probably have problems with respiration. It's quite dangerous at these levels. You have other areas, Bakersfield. So that was the quick presentation, and then I created a survey, and there's also the web map. I don't know if I went too quickly.
No, you're good. I'll make sure to share your survey with our viewers and our readers so that they can give their opinion and give you some more data to be able to analyze.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions?
You were saying before that nitrogen and carbon dioxide, the small amount of nitrogen equals a large amount of carbon dioxide. Can you explain that a little more?
Okay, so in fact, each molecule has a mass, a size, okay? So carbon itself, when you add oxygen to it, it becomes bigger, okay? So it can absorb more energy, and because it does that, it means when it's in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide and not as carbon, it absorbs more energy and it heats the atmosphere, okay? And nitrogen dioxide is a bigger molecule, so it absorbs more energy. And this is why it has its impact on global warming is greater, because it holds more energy. I'm like oversimplifying it. The thing with climate change, in fact, the problem is with the water cycle. So what is going to happen is, because you have more heat energy in the atmosphere, water is going to evaporate, and you're going to have more water vapor in the atmosphere, and you're going to have more rain. So the water cycle is going to speed up. You're going to have more floods, more rain. The sea level is going to rise. So this is one of the most important impacts of climate change. In fact, it's the impact on the water cycle.
And it's cyclical because nitrogen affects vegetation, which is normally a way for processing carbon and reducing carbon because they absorb it to process it into oxygen.
Yes, absolutely. And so my motivation is, well, you can see here in this area, you have, it's a different ecotype. It's the cool desert is heavily impacted. And it's also a question about the vegetation type there, I think. So I want to investigate to see how the vegetation, because here you have the warm desert and it's less impacted, but it's probably because you have a different vegetation type. So it's two things. It's the impact of human activity and the vegetation type, and of course so here you have heavily impacted ecosystem that is just crazy. Almost the whole of the Mediterranean California is polluted. It's quite bad. So my motivation is to see how vegetation impacts pollution and how pollution impacts vegetation, because you have different types of plants that absorb and produce different nitrogen dioxide. It's not very clearly well understood, so it's interesting for me to do this type of study. And I can do it with satellites.
Well, I look forward to seeing more of your research, and thank you for joining me, and I'll make sure to share your survey with our watchers and readers so that they can give you some input.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Our sponsor today is also Darren Gibbs Industrial Equipment Repair. They do welders, plasma cutters, overhead lifting equipment, torches and regulators, air tools, cold saw blade shape sharpening, cutting tool sharpening, hydraulic cylinders repaired and manufactured. Make sure to check out their website for equipment that they have for sale at valley.equipment, or contact Darren Gibbs Industrial Services at 559-351-3280, or give them an email at contact@darrengibbs.com. And now we will have a moment of silence for our Black Lives Matter community.